Thank you very much, and it's a great pleasure to be back at GYSS. My only addition to the very kind introduction is that we won't be waiting until the end to engage you. We were having a discussion earlier. We are really keen to find out what excites you, what worries you about AI in terms of the research role that it can play, the risks that it brings. So do please prep your questions and go to those microphones whenever you like. I've been introduced, Simon Chesterman, coming at this from the legal perspective, but I'm trying not to be the kind of lawyer who appoints him or herself as the minister of no, because that's the worst thing a lawyer can be. Rather, one of the things that I've been trying to do in my area is look at the management of risk, and that's something we want to talk about, how we get the opportunities of AI while mitigating the risks. And just by way of framing, I think all of us are aware that AI is an important phenomenon. In the research field, you've heard over the course of this week from many prize winners, including Nobel Prize winners, some of whom are on the panel. And it was striking last year that one of the Nobel Prizes in chemistry went to work that could not have been done without the use of AI, the AlphaFold protein folding exercise, where Demis Hassabis got up and received the award, and entirely well-deserved. But AlphaFold 2 wasn't there, the AI system that was fundamental to the research. I think it is broadly accepted that there's huge potential in areas like drug discovery, potential democratization of knowledge, the ability to access research tools that would have been very limited in the past. So there's huge opportunities there, but there are also risks. Again, I think everyone in the room is familiar with the problem of hallucination. In the research field, there is an emerging reproducibility crisis based on work done using AI that can be hard to reproduce, partly because it's opaque. It's very hard to interpret, very hard to understand. The reason for that is not that it's a bug. Hallucination is actually a feature. If AI systems, generative AI systems in particular, did not hallucinate, they wouldn't be creative. And so when I'm talking to people in the business world, what I say is if you want to rely on generative AI, you can do it, but you really have to treat it like you would a very smart intern with a drinking problem. So smart can do all sorts of things. Intern, you can't blame the intern if something goes wrong. And the drinking problem, you can't always tell when they're going to make mistakes. So there are real risks here. There's also problems of research integrity. Again, I think many of us are familiar with the problem of AI hallucinations being passed off as real, but also of early disputes about whether you could include, for example, ChatGPT as a co-author. So most serious journals do not allow that. But there's been a kind of game researchers have been playing, and you can still find some of this in the literature. There is literally, I think it was a materials science journal published by Elsevier last year, where the opening sentence of the introduction was, "Certainly, here is a draft introduction for your topic." And so that's maybe what a Canadian friend of mine used to say, no one's completely useless. You can always be a bad example. And so there are, I think, a lot of good examples and bad examples. And so what I'd like to do in this panel is really draw on the expertise on the panel, but also the expertise and the creativity in the room to think through what are the opportunities that AI offers in the research space, what are the risks, and how can we manage those risks? So I won't do this in great detail, but very briefly, I think you've met David earlier this morning, but David Klenerman is Royal Society GSK Professor of Molecular Medicine at Cambridge, where he focuses on the development and application of physical methods, particularly laser spectroscopy and single molecule fluorescence to biological and biomedical problems, and best known, among other things, for co-inventing next-generation DNA sequencing with Sir Shankar Balasubramanian. And one of the things we were talking about in the break was that in areas like biotechnology, there will be huge potential for new discoveries, but to actually roll it out to humans is going to be a real challenge. Just on my left, a colleague at NUS is Professor Konstantin Novoselov, who's Tan Chin Tuan Centennial Professor at NUS, where he's also Director of the Institute for Functional Intelligent Materials, and Langworthy Professor of Physics and Royal Society Research Professor at the University of Manchester, known, among other things, for groundbreaking work in diverse materials, particularly graphene, for which he was awarded the 2010 Nobel Prize in Physics. And I think in 2D materials and material science more generally, also huge potential. Dr. Patricia Lee is Chief Scientist for Product Technologies at Quantinuum, where she leads the technology roadmap effort to scale up trapped ion quantum computers and achieve fault tolerance. I realize I'm between the quantum people today. We'll work on that. And best known for her work, among other things, on phase control of geometric phase gates in trapped ions. And earlier was talking about in her own PhD work, she spent a lot of time solving a problem that she had not understood. Her supervisor told her was impossible, which I think is a great story we might come back to, because the best way, I think it was Tim said, if you want to get a Nobel Prize, do something theoretically impossible. And if you can achieve that, you'll get recognition. So last panelist, Tim Hunt, has been a biochemist for, I won't say how long, some years, starting in Cambridge and eventually working on the translational control of maternal mRNA in sea urchin and clam eggs. And again, was a topic that he had been told many people thought was impossible. So the question I'd like to start, and maybe David, I'll start with you, is, I suppose, what is your experience working with AI and what excites you about the potentials that AI offers in terms of the research space generally and your own field in particular?
So in my talk, I showed you briefly how we used AI to analyze the data that we generated to come up with a combination of a decision tree that was very good at diagnosing Alzheimer's. And I was certainly impressed by it because we tried to analyze the data ourselves and with dividing one parameter by another, and the AI actually came up with an algorithm that was much more effective. So I was actually very impressed by what was possible, and we're very keen to take it forward. But I mean, I see it as a tool that's very good at seeing patterns in large amounts of data, and at least short term, just another tool like all the other tools that we've been using to do our research. So that's really what excites me about the field at the moment. It is less its broad potential, but more how it can enable us to move our research forward as fast as possible.
Yeah, so Konstantin, can I turn to you? I mean, one of the challenges in a field like yours is there's lots of possible physical combinations of molecules that you have to test. What excites you about the potential of AI in the area of smart materials, for example?
What excites me about AI is that I don't understand it. So it clearly works in some cases at least, and it's unfortunately I don't think it has been demonstrated to work in my field so far, and so that it probably hopefully means that there is a huge potential. Now, whether and how soon and when is it going to be uncovered, this huge potential is still a question, and there have been quite ups and downs in our excitement about AI. So everyone thought we're going to solve all the world's problems in the next 6 months. Didn't happen. So now we are back at the drawing board, and we realize we have to do very serious work because of the specifics of crystals when you have to work with the atoms and molecules. So the space of data is much more sparse than when you work with the language, unfortunately. So, but I still remain quite hopeful for that.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that you're Canada, and I agree, I don't understand a lot of AI either. What is striking in this field is we're having this deployment of technology that even Sam Altman from OpenAI will come and say he doesn't understand how it does some of the things that it does. And I think that's maybe foregrounding some of the things we might come to in risks. But
Even Trump don't understand this.
Even Donald Trump, my goodness, what hope is there for the rest of us? I don't understand why Donald Trump invaded Venezuela, but that's a topic for another day. Patricia, you're a bit closer, I think, to the development of technology. What excites you about AI in general and generative AI, I suppose, in particular?
Yeah, so we're looking at how to use AI for quantum. So it kind of goes. There are several ways you can apply this. I know, kind of, generative quantum AI is a little bit of a buzzword, but when it comes down to it, it's a little more straightforward than this. And that's you can use AI to improve your quantum algorithm. So, for example, we've done a collaboration with Google that optimizes a particular fault-tolerant operation, right? And that's a very simple, like, how can we simplify these circuits that we're going to be repeating over and over again when we do fault-tolerant quantum computing, and that's definitely worth, investing, the resources to go find the best answers, and then AI can help with that rather than having humans trying to like figure out how to reduce, the resources there. And then there are other things like, for example, our quantum computers can generate a lot of data from things like, quantum simulation or chemical simulation on the machines, and you can take that data and train AI, right? This is data that didn't exist before, and maybe AI has better ideas about how to make better materials, how to generate, interactions that could optimize a certain property, but I would say, there's no definitive proof that that's going to work. It is just something that people haven't tried yet, so that's what we're trying and seeing whether that gives us some advantage or not.
Yeah, I mean, this is where, I mean, the nature of scientific discovery is, I think, worth digging into a little bit. And maybe, Tim, I'll ask you about the excitement of AI, but also how you think about discovery. Because as I think Konstantin and Patricia have emphasized, and I think David also touched on this, AI is very good at manipulating large data sets. And if it's a bounded data set, you can do all sorts of analysis and so on. But scientific discovery is a bit more than that, isn't it? And so one of the, again, I suppose the question, what are you excited about by AI, and what do you think it leaves in terms of, or how do you think that overlaps with your own idea of what scientific discovery and pushing the frontiers of human knowledge is?
Yeah, I don't know why I'm on this panel, by the way. Because I don't have a lab anymore. I haven't done any scientific research for a decade or more. So I'm an AI skeptic. How do I come across it? It's interesting what it's good at and what it's not good at. For example, everybody knows about this protein folding program called AlphaFold. My colleagues who depend on this thing tell me it's absolutely wonderful, has totally transformed their work, speeded up things no end, really, really, really useful. But you still have to check it out. It's not always absolutely right. And in my experience of biology, when things are not quite right, they're quite often quite wrong. So you have to be careful. I come across it, to get here, I wanted to know when the first train went from Tottenham Court Road to Heathrow. It was very good at answering that question. Got it right. That was good. My wife comes across it all the time because she teaches and examines, and quite a lot of the students turn in things that are manifestly written by AI. And they don't generally do terribly well because it tends to give sort of weird, plain vanilla answers. And I don't understand, theoretically speaking, how AI can actually suggest any experiments. We were talking earlier about a good example of this. I mean, none of us thought that messenger RNA vaccines would be possible. That sounded like just a ridiculous idea. And early on, I myself did not go after something which we could easily have done, which was to isolate messenger RNA from red cells, the messenger RNA for hemoglobin. Why not? Because the experts in the field and the literature said it was incredibly unstable. So I think if AI had been available then, it would have told us, don't even think about trying because it's theoretically impossible. Well, I mean, actually, it's not theoretically impossible. I mean, eggs contain mRNA that's, I'm not sure what the lifetime is, but it's certainly measured in months rather than milliseconds, right? So how can AI actually suggest an experiment? How can an AI tell you what we don't know rather than what we do know? Science, people often say that science is a knowledge-based thing. In my experience, science is an ignorance-based thing. We're constantly probing nature to see how she works. And you do an experiment and nature says, good guess, Tim, but you're not quite right, try again. And that's how it works.
Yeah, I mean, there's a wonderful line from Pablo Picasso was interviewed in 1950s, I think late 50s, and he was talking about computers which were just coming up, and he said, no, computers are useless. All they can give you is answers. And so maybe before we go to the risks of AI, I'd come back to each of you about how you think about discovery in your own field. pushing the frontiers of knowledge? Because again, I think most people in the room know that generative AI in particular, there are other forms of AI, but generative AI is a prediction engine, the sort of stochastic parrots. It's based on the predicting the next token, which will essentially be either conservative, or if you want it to hallucinate, it'll go in different directions. But that's quite different from the way most people, at least at the moment, think about experimentation and testing. So yeah, I suppose, well, Konstantin, you said that it's not useful yet, but remember, this is the worst AI will ever be. It's going to keep improving. And so do you see a path to AI being more useful or threatening human discovery? Or is there something unique about what each of you have done in your fields that computers can't yet do and potentially might never do? Maybe Konstantin and then David.
Right. So how I see the science is developing is that we create a mass of data and a mass of knowledge, and then at certain moment we need to structure this, and that's where the discovery is coming into play, when we need to discover a new language which would sort it out, and suddenly this mass of data start to make sense, and it falls into certain locuses and creates a nice pattern. And usually we do it through the invention of a new language. It can be, I don't know, a wave function, or it could be quaternions in mathematics. And there are many examples of this. And what really worries me is that in the AI demonstrate, it does it somewhere internally, and it creates this latent space exactly where it sorts things out, but it remains hidden from us. So it's demonstrated that it doesn't need this beautification of the data. It can work with it internally. And how we've been teached physics is that if beautiful, if elegant means right, and that's the sense which we're missing at the moment in AI. And I'm sure that, I hope at least, that once we understand that, we will probably bring this sense of beautification back. But so far, I don't see it.
Okay, David.
I mean, I think we all do experiments. So, I mean, I see us working at the boundary between what we know and what we don't know. And we do experiments, and then sometimes they work, rarely, and sometimes they don't work. And when they work, then we move in that direction into the unknown and then do more experiments. And so I can't see how AI is really going to help us do that. I think it's all about trying things that haven't been tried before. That's the creative part of the type of science we do and how we discover new things. I think there's a separate type of discovery where you have large amounts of data and you can't see the patterns in that data, where AI is very good. But I mean, I think there's discovery and there's breakthrough discovery. And if you're talking about doing breakthrough discoveries where you'll win prestigious prizes, then it's all at the frontier of what we know and what we don't know. And I'm not sure AI will help us. I think you look things up via AI and they'll put you off trying these experiments. So it might even dampen down our abilities to do discovery. So I'm not sure it's really going to help us explore the exciting frontiers between where we are and where we want to get to.
Yeah, I mean, in organizational literature on AI, sometimes people present a very simple 2x2 matrix. If you think of things that are repetitive versus non-repetitive or atypical, and high risk or low risk. If something is repetitive and low risk, you can outsource it to AI. And so I suppose one of the questions I'd ask, in different ways, you've all been involved in experimentational work, and there's a lot of repetition. Like, you've got to do things over and over again, and that would be the sort of thing that you could potentially outsource to AI. And so I suppose relevant to people in the room, one question that's coming up in the literature on research and AI is that you might be able to outsource the junior work. The doctoral student, the postdoctoral student who's doing the repetitive work of experimentation. You have sort of robotic labs even. And that might enable you to check these various ideas. But there are a couple of problems there. One, you won't have the serendipitous discovery, you won't have the beauty that Konstantin's describing, but you also won't have the training that I assume all of you got to where you are, partly because you spent thousands, presumably, of hours doing things that weren't necessarily the scientific breakthrough, but that gave you the skills, the muscle memory, the perspective that made that possible. So one of the risks that we worry about in the AI space is that it will sort of cannibalize the junior work that makes it possible to become a senior researcher. Maybe, sort of Patricia, I'll start with you, and Tim, but then come back if you have perspectives on this as well.
Yeah, so maybe I'll give an example. In the quantum computing, there are definitely software out there that uses AI and machine learning to tune up your quantum computer. So for example, if you give them the software a few knobs, it'll come out with these pulses that go all over the place, but somehow, at least they claim that it would be better than your typical, pulse to get a quantum gate, right? Quantum gate, like an entangling gate, for example. And we looked at that, and I think if you don't know your system well, then that's actually not a bad tool, and it'll probably do better than your first-year graduate student who doesn't know how to tune these things up. They can probably do better. But compared to us, we have very detailed model of the system. We have very analytical and numerical simulations of what's going on. And we know the error sources. So we haven't found the software that could beat our fidelity, the fidelity of our gate, for example, right? And even if we do find one, the problem is that we have no idea what is happening, right? How did AI arrive at that pulse shape? And how do we continue to improve upon that, right? For us, we understand all the error mechanisms and all the error sources, so we know that, okay, we got to go fix the laser noise, and we got to go fix our electronic noise, and we got to change our pulse timing in such a way to sort of maximize that fidelity, and AI doesn't tell you any of that. And so even if we get a temporary improvement, we have no path to continue to improve upon that. And maybe someday AI will be smart enough to tell us why, but today the technology is not there.
Do we have any pure mathematicians in the room? I'm not. The president of the university is, but he hasn't done maths for a while. But one of the things I gather from mathematics is there's a whole controversy about computational proofs, that you can prove things robustly with computers, but you don't understand the underlying logic, you don't learn new discoveries along the way. Tim, what do you think about in terms of the outsourcing of junior research to AI systems?
Well, I can't see in my line of country where that would be. I mean, you have to, because an awful lot of it is people's sort of skill with hands, attention to tiny details, and exactly the kind of thing that AI is not. I mean, I don't know what you would even ask the computer to do. So I don't get it. I really don't get it.
Yeah, we try to use both the robotic systems and the students, and I don't think that we will get rid of the students anytime soon. And the reason is not only because all the professors are tyrants and they've got this sadistic pleasure from making the students, calling them idiots and making them cry. No, it's actually because quite often it's and many discoveries actually been made this way through either a stupid mistake of a student or a professor, or just including myself, or it's just the lack of the novice. When you new in the field, then you actually start asking questions, and which the experts in the field just put it under the carpet a long time ago and take it as a dogma, and then those new students start to question this, and that's this fresh blood in any field is extremely important, and that's so students challenging the professors is one of the driving force of the science.
So next time your supervisor scolds you for making a mistake, say, I'm just doing what Konstantin told me to do.
So I agree. I mean, I think we're training our students how to discover new things. So we're not training them to do manual tasks. So we're training them how to discover new things. How, if experiments fails, to work out why it fails and do it again and get it to work. So my idea of a PhD, I'd like to get my students to do an experiment that no one on the planet has done before. It might not work, but at least they've reached the point where they're right at the frontier of science.
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, one of the things I think is that it's very hard ahead of time to know what tiny clue would open up the field. And I don't see how AI could possibly do that. I mean, and in retrospect, you sort of kick yourself and say, why the hell didn't we realize that months ago and do it then? Because, you know, in retrospect, it's obvious, but at the time it wasn't, because there were just so many possibilities, too many to choose from.
Yeah, so I don't want to criticize AI too much, but that's something which give me hope that our profession will still be there in the next 1,500 and 200 years. Is that so? You mentioned that AI is creative, and that's for me is a bit questionable. So and as I said, many discoveries come as a fluke. So you really need to find this one small kick in your IV curve or whatever, and ask yourself a question: is it real? And maybe try to amplify it, and so on. And so your many discoveries is the phase transitions, and those are rare events. And that's where AI is actually quite bad to pick up the rare events. So it can be trained, and what we do now, we really train them that on mass it works well. Discoveries are always rare events. So and maybe we just don't know how to train those for the phase transitions for the rare ones. But so far, I don't think it's there.
Yeah, and I think for bounded problems, if there's like things like chess, Go, you can optimize. But if it's an open-ended question, there's this idea of distribution shift. If you get outside of the distribution, this is mainly on generative AI, then the error rate increases. So I want to talk a little bit about risks and then open it up to Q&A, because there's a lot of, I assume, expertise, but also interest, maybe concern, enthusiasm in the room. So just on the risks, I mean, I touched on hallucinations. There is the question of opacity, but there's also the question of who's actually in charge. And one of the biggest transformations in AI research over the last 15, well, let's say 14 years since machine learning really took off, is the move from public to private. The fact that the compute resources, the amount of data, the talent required has really gravitated towards industry. So if you went back a dozen years, most of what became the large language models of today started in places like Stanford. Now, almost every model is in a for-profit corporation. A decade ago, PhDs in AI went about equally to industry and academia. Now, almost all the PhDs in AI go to industry. Nothing against industry. But this does sort of change the economics. And to the extent that AI might not be taking over the role of researchers, but at least playing more of a role in research, do you worry about that sort of shift from, if not necessarily public universities, but at least institutions acting, we would hope, in the public interest or being curiosity driven? Do you worry about the impact on incentives if some of the fundamental tools that are playing an increasing role, at least in this space, are driven by for-profit corporations? Maybe I'll turn to the corporations first.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is sometimes a little bit more challenging, perhaps, right? And I think there's also this trust, right? I mean, we use these AI tools without really knowing what it's doing, without knowing what happens. But for sort of technology development, part of it is sort of what information it has access to. So, in my example of, can we get a better generate a better interaction to perform quantum computation. It depends on how good your model is, right? And of course, we have our own proprietary model that's, maybe a little more developed in certain areas. Other people have better models somewhere else. And then, it's a question, if you just ask AI to generically train up and find the best, generate the best interaction for quantum computing for trapped ions, is probably not going to do very well. but if it has access to some of those specialized models, maybe it can do better, right? And so, yeah, it is a question of, how we deal with all the IP and be able to effectively use it. But yeah, I think that is a question for the field to, how to collaborate and how to make use of it.
I think in the long run, fundamentally, the development of AI would be beneficial for science, especially in terms of the knowledge dissemination. So I think fundamentally knowledge cannot be proprietary. Technology can be. Knowledge is just divided equally and spread everywhere in the humanity. And AI potentially should be able to help to democratize this. So it would hopefully remove the boundary for the journal access and so on. But you are absolutely right that on the way we will have to sort out somehow, and I have zero recipe at the moment how we can do it on this, on the fact that it's extremely expensive to create those models, and at this moment it has to be done by a limited, very small number of private players. How are we going to get from current state to where we really want, where it is distributed? I don't have an answer.
Yeah, and in addition to the for-profit motive, I'll come to you in a second, David, you've got far fewer safeguards. I mean, I can tell you if we were developing something like ChatGPT at NUS, which will willingly act like a lawyer, a mental therapist, a therapist of various stripes, give you all sorts of commercial advice, there would be institutional review board, ethics panels, all sorts of consent protocols, none of which apply to these for-profit corporations.
But also, at this moment of time, I don't think we. So how do you treat AI? What is AI for you? So some people treat it as a search engine, which is not. It's a function, and unfortunately is the unknown function. So but it's a mathematical function, and it can be even chaotic at some places. So it's impossible at this moment of time to treat it as the source of ultimate truth. So that's so at this moment we can treat it as an agent, as the helper, but not as the source of the ultimate truth. We just 1 second. I will advertise our conference. So every year we run AI conference, AI for X, and so AI for science, AI for medicine, for physics, for everything. And one of the most popular panel last year was AI for world domination, and that was actually people really, there were fantastic talks when you make two AI engines play against each other, and they can convince each other to change their opinion. So which means that it doesn't give you the ultimate truth. It's really a function.
Fascinating.
So, I mean, like you said, there are probably more problems outside science with AI than inside science. But I think the biggest problem is if it's proprietary software, it's reproducibility of data and the ability to repeat other people's experiments. If you're using someone's software which you don't actually know what it does, it might be updated without you knowing. I think that's a big problem if people are using this as the key way they're generating results, and people can't go back and repeat these experiments. I think that's a serious concern.
Yeah, and I think this does become a much larger issue, as I think you've both said. It sort of bleeds far beyond just scientific research. I mean, just anecdotally, as we shift from, so for 20 years we've been Googling for information. And the advantage of Googling is you get a list of links, and that does two things. One, it shows you there are multiple possible sources of answers, and you know that some of them are advertising. So one, you know diversity of possible answers. Two, you know how it's paid for. But increasingly, people are now just chatting, and you get one answer, and it's not immediately clear how it's paid for. And eventually it's going to be paid for either through subscription or probably through advertising, which skews the incentives and introduces all sorts of risks. I mean, another thing, I mean, Konstantin, you rightly said AI should be regarded as an agent or a tool. And there's a really interesting emerging discussion. Why does ChatGPT say I? Because that is deeply connected with our tendency to anthropomorphize. And sure, people in this room might understand, okay, stochastic parrots, prediction engines, but for a huge and a growing number of people, these things are, if not sentient, they're going to be treated as if they were sentient. So that's a different kind of risk. We've got about 25 minutes, and we did agree we really want to, okay, great, please come to the microphones. There is a class participation component to today's assessment, so make your questions good. Okay, all right, we guessed there would be questions. Okay, we're going to take one question from each side and then come back to the panel. And then, so you get one question each. We'll start with you. Very quick, your name and the question, and then we'll take the other question. We'll come back to the panel, please.
Hi, I'm Rihan from local university, and my question is that I also work on computer science. I heard a lot of distrust of AI, and my question is that if we can somehow increase some kind of explainability, probably, but sacrifice some of the accuracy, would you prefer this kind of AI model, or would you still prefer a more accurate but less explainable AI? And further, would you consider trustworthy as one of the most important research direction in future, even more important than increasing the accuracy of the AI model? Thank you.
Okay, great question. Explainability versus accuracy. I'll take a question from this side, then we'll come back.
Hi, my name is Deepika, and I'm from EPFL Switzerland. My question is actually related to the very title of this panel discussion. So as Patricia Lee mentioned yesterday, that bytes are growing larger and larger. So my question is, how do we level up our brains to, to match up to this growing number of bytes in the age of AI, where we are exposed to a lot of automation, AI, quantum learning, and stuff. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Do you want to take the...
So okay, on the breadth versus the depth, unfortunately these days the amount of literature is such that there is no one can keep up anymore with that. So for me personally, but again, but it's personal. We need some breadth, because you sometimes you can quite easily miss something. So the depths, I'm sure I can dig out myself, but the breadth is important. And on the human computer interface, we call those things neural networks, but I think it's a fake. So we don't really know how our brain works. So that's it will still be. It will still be quite a while before we understand how do we think. So it's I'm sure that it will definitely. So AI is definitely going to help in terms of the computer brain interface, but I think it's complete fake to think that it's on the par that we are matching one to another. So.
Patricia, I know if you want to speak to the opacity problem, that the accuracy comes from billions of variables that are impossible to explain to a human, but if you want it to be explained, you need to sacrifice some of the accuracy. And how do you make that trade-off?
Yeah, I think for me personally, I prefer the accuracy, because otherwise it's just too much noise, right? We have too much information. A lot of it is useful, a lot of it is not useful, and then trying to figure out what is what. That, again, comes back to the capacity problem. How do we deal with it, right? And I feel like science in some ways is a matter of condensing all this data into some of the things that are important and accessible to humans, right? The things that we can understand and we can actually do something about it. Otherwise, it's just information, right? Just information out there if you can't do anything with it, if it's not helpful. And so maybe the two questions are related in that, yeah, it is a matter of condensing it to something that actually is, leads to something else, right? And whatever the goal, objective that you're going for.
David?
So on the accuracy versus explainability, I think it depends on the application. So there are applications where you just want to look at an image and work out with high diagnostic accuracy whether someone's got cancer or not, and you don't need to understand how you've arrived at that diagnosis. And so, you know, so that's one thing, but there are other situations where you want to get molecular insights into what's going on, and then you really want to maximize explainability. So in our work, wouldn't want something that predict the patterns of aggregates in the brain. We will much more want a model, basically some sort of model that can explain the patterns in the brain, but ultimately we want to come in and intervene molecularly to alter these patterns. So having something that's perfect but no molecular understanding is not what we want. We want explainability.
Yeah, so it depends on the question. Great. Okay, yeah, we'll take the next two questions. Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Philip. I'm a researcher from the University of Oulu. My background is computer science, specifically reinforcement learning and AI. So first of all, I want to thank everybody for this excellent panel. I was positively giddy to listen about it because I'm a huge AI skeptic and I'm very tired of listening people saying, oh, AI is the new, I don't know, sliced bread. So I specifically want to point my question about the name artificial intelligence. So we don't have a definition of what intelligence is, yet people seem to say that what we're currently investigating, LLMs are intelligent in some cases. So my question would be, what would the definition of intelligence be for you? I would say that autonomy is something that is important. By the way, Professor Chesterman, I really liked your moderation because you gave a lot of good examples for the positives and negatives. And in the beginning, you said something of the sort of that AlphaFold should have earned the Nobel Prize. And then later on, when we were talking about, again, discovery and discovery through the use of LLMs, somebody said that, yeah, I mean, that there is no agency there. We're just looking at what the tool has given us. Without us being there to observe what the tool says, there is no discovery. So I guess my question is, what is for you intelligence, and how do we fight the hype that is around this field that there's going to be one day super intelligence when we don't know what intelligence is?
Okay, we could spend 3 hours on that, but great question.
Okay, my name is Shuxing Song, also a PhD student from EPFL Switzerland. Okay, thanks for the panelists' nice discussion. My question is about, a general question, like sometimes the AIs, they are bullshitting, they are conveying the wrong information. That's, especially when I want to discuss about my research with some interdisciplinary fields. I'm not an expert, I cannot distinguish if their statements is right or wrong. I mean, especially in some fields that I'm not an expert in that. So I want to ask the panelists how you deal with these things, and if it's possible for the AI that when they are enlarging their database, is it possible for them also to purify the information?
Okay, so what do we mean by intelligence, and why is AI so stupid?
Good question.
I mean, intelligence is something that people have struggled to define for as long as I can remember. I mean, in general, if you meet somebody who's much smarter than you, you find that they're more intelligent. You say they're more intelligent. It's as simple as that.
I agree with Tim. So usually you would say intelligence is consciousness and creativity, but we don't have any metrics how to measure either one of them. So the Turing test, which AI has passed already, that's it's one of the way. Clearly, we will have to invent a new one, and I don't think. I mean, I'm sure that people are working on it, but at this moment of time, we can say what is intelligence, but we can't measure it, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, the whole British education system in my day was determined by an intelligence test. And if you passed the test, you could go to a good school, and if you didn't pass the test, you went to a bad thing. It was absolutely terrible, and it was very, very unfair because it tested one particular set of skills. But there are all kinds of sets of skills. I mean, it didn't. You could be good at sport. You might be a brilliant musician. You could be a fabulous logician. You could do maths, which I can't. I mean, it's such a multidimensional field.
At least we have one person who passed the intelligence test, so we can. So now we have the unit how we can measure in teams. So, and I have zero. I mean, personally, I only rarely use just maybe for programming and the AI. So you have to test. So just remember that it's not a search engine; it's a function. That's
Yeah, I mean, in the AI literature, there's been long debates about the sort of intelligence is whatever we haven't done yet with the machine, although I think, as you've said, the Turing test having been passed. I mean, IQ tests are one measure. They're deeply problematic. They're basically very good at testing how good you are at doing IQ tests. But one interesting finding, some of you might know the Flynn effect and the reverse Flynn effect. Through the 20th century, raw IQ, so IQ is always, the average is 100, but the raw IQ test through the 20th century went up. We actually don't know why. Could be nutrition, could be education of girls, all sorts of factors. And it peaks in the mid 90s, and now it's going down.
Oh, really?
And so there's some evidence, and that's around the time. And one working hypothesis, that's when personal computing went mainstream, and we offload a lot of our intellect. And together with our devices, we're much more functional, but we joke about not remembering telephone numbers, being able to navigate, and that's maybe surmountable. But if we're outsourcing the formation of opinions, for example, by asking ChatGPT or whatever, then that's a real problem. Okay, so I don't think we really answered the distribution shift question, but the one thing I would take away from your question, in the law school here, we teach, basically teach case analysis. So analyze cases and then sort of how do you interpret them? And then we show how good and bad ChatGPT and other models are at case analysis. And then we ask the question, how could you tell whether it was good or bad? And it's only because you've done the first body of work. So I think you've really highlighted one of the key challenges here, which is that in your areas of expertise, you'll be pretty good at judging whether AI is good or bad. And the risk is as you go beyond your area of expertise, we become much more credulous, and that's a real problem. I'm sorry, we're going to have to ask the next two questions, but thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Konstantin from ETH Zurich. And my question is about your opinion of application of AI for supervision and education of both PhD and undergrad students, where we can use it or where we should not use it.
And will anyone pay us for it? Okay, yes. Should AI be supervising? Okay.
Very good morning, Professor. My name is Adolphus. I'm from the NUS Singapore Nuclear Research and Safety Institute. My background is in risk and uncertainty quantification. So I happened to come across a special issue in the journal recently on the use of GenAI to do verification and validation in structural and structural and mechanical engineering. And I begin to wonder, so it relates to the first question that was asked earlier on trustworthy AI. So one of the strategy that's being used is physics-informed machine learning, where they include governing equations, physics governing equations into the loss function that's used to train the neural network. I just want to hear from you if there are any further strategies that could enhance the trustworthiness of AI models. Thank you.
Do you want to take the structural question?
I think we have a lot of robots and avatars in our labs, either biological or not biological. I think we need more good creative PhD students who are trained by good creative sciences. So I would like students programming robots rather than robots programming students. That's in my mind.
Other comments on do you want to talk about the transparency, explainability aspect of that?
Yeah. So I think I don't know how to make it more reliable, right? I think that right now we still don't quite trust the machine learning, but they can still be a very powerful tool. So one example is, we have a lot of these microfabrication devices. We can use machine learning to go and analyze and find defects, right? So rather than having a human that had to scan through the entire image of every single chip, the machine learning can identify some, where the features are and do some characterization. And then humans still have to go back and take a look at those and say, well, is this really a problem or is this not really a problem, right? And so there's a check. And so I see, AI as more of a tool, right, that assists the humans, sort of, allow humans to focus on where the problems are rather than, sorry, attentions be like spread out across things that, you know, may or may not have value. And so, but I don't guess I don't have a solution to figuring out how to make it more reliable. But I think at this stage, that's kind of where we are.
Thank you.
One quick point on the supervision. There's a professor at Georgia Tech who I think for maybe 10 years now has been running an experiment where some of his TAs are bots and some are human, and all of them interact via email, and basically the students are not better than random at guessing who's human, who's a bot. But certainly in terms of overall supervision, I think we would want to stick with humans. Did you want to come in? Otherwise, well, we've got a...
I mean, I would just say I would be healthily skeptical of anything that comes up on any of these searches. I mean, healthily skeptical of any results you get, and I would go back and test them. And I think the AI is nothing different. You should be asking yourself, is this real? Doing checks, making sure that you actually believe what you're seeing, either on the computer screen or when you do real experiments.
It occurs to me that one good example of AI, which I use every day practically, is is Google Maps, right? And every so often it tells you to go a different way for no apparent reason. And you don't know whether that's because it knows there's a roadblock ahead or an accident or something, or whether it's just freaked out. But I'm just saying, that is, I mean, it's a huge database and it's very good at finding the best way there, whether you're walking or driving.
And a big fight whether London cabbies should continue to have that exercise, learning the knowledge. Although literally I was in a car crash, everyone's fine, but I was crashed into by someone who the sat-nav said, turn left. And so she turned left and hit me. Wow. I don't think that was Google Maps. For liability purposes, I'm not accusing Google Maps. Thank you. We're going to have to take the next couple of questions. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Chen Yue, and I'm an experimental physicist. So my question is, I think you mentioned that you don't want, I think AI couldn't do the things that is unknown. And nowadays we are using it like probably in simulation and designing mostly. And then I want to ask, in the experiments, like physics experiments or chemical or biomedical experiments, is there something or some part of the work that we can actually integrate AI in to help us? For example, I can think of in my experiment, many things needs to be controlled, like noise or the stability and all these things. And then instead of trying different parameters for like maybe a long time or weeks, or trying to find the best solutions of controlling or reducing the noise, is it like there's some other ways, or for example, integrate the AI like in your fields?
Yeah, so we've been talking a lot about generative AI. This might be a lot of just automation. So is that useful? Please.
Yeah, hi, my name is Lamia Korik, and I'm from the Karolinska Institute. So my background is medicine. And I mean, we already talked about this, how human errors might, lead to key findings. So, I mean, my question is more so, if you needed to take a side, do you think that AI is diminishing or improving human creativity? And if so, is there any approaches we need to consider in order to, use it safely and regarding to creative thinking?
Too early to tell, I think.
You mean we should have cocktails when we're discussing it? Okay, so responses on the automation?
For the experimental physicists, so I think there is definitely a huge space for AI to be used in automation. It's very good on fitting some very complex functions, and I can imagine like proximity correction in SEMs, TMs, for example. There are on synthesis when you need to explore very complex phase, which otherwise it's impossible to fit with any analytical solution. I'm sure that there, I'm like 100% positive that it is very useful, and we do use it. So that's already it's completely, so it has been proven already, and I think it's going to be broader and broader and broader Yeah, but for the second question, I think well, the like human errors, I would actually trust more AI, at least in some areas. Like when you go to a GP, especially in some countries, I would rather go to a
Bot.
yeah, to a bot probably.
Well, ideally, you'd have both. You want someone who's doing that. Any additional comments on the automation or creativity?
But one of the mysterious things on that, so is you always thought the medical diagnosis would be a perfect case where AI would work. And I think people have really tried, and it for some reason doesn't, but I'm not an expert in
No,
that.
I think it works when you give them the parameters. So if you just have measurements from blood, it's actually very good. But when it gets the answers from patients, then its diagnostic accuracy goes down phenomenally because it can't interpret when someone says, I'm unwell. Someone might.
I see.
Oh,
So
how
if you
unwell
measure
they-
their blood values of
Yeah, but I
this
see
and that and the other,
we've
it's
got
okay.
doctors who've never seen SARS or cholera, or so then so they forgot what they learned in the school. But the question was about creativity, so whether it can be creative or not. And I already gave my answer that I'm a bit skeptical about it because the discovery and creativity is a rare event, so it's phase transition, which is always difficult to
But the next
exploit.
iteration, I understand, of AI is going to have logic built into it, and that might.
Logic and creativity is not the same. That's
Well,
so if you talk to an artist, so who can be creative, so for them, the absence of logic might sometimes they actually praise it, unfortunately.
Well, and arts, that's the next thing AI is coming for. If you're on Spotify, there are these generations of AI artists. Thank you. We've got 3 minutes and 2 more questions, which we'll try and answer, please.
Hello, my name is Aditya. I'm an experimental nuclear physicist from the Australian National University. My question concerns the title, Leveling Up Research. So I just wanted to ask, like a lot of us get into research because we're motivated by questions and then we find a problem and then spend some time trying to solve it. Whereas here it seems we're being told like, here's a solution and then you can like find problems to apply it to. This requires like a shift in our thinking. How do we accomplish that, and how much time should we actually invest in doing it?
Okay, I push back against the idea we're telling you there are solutions. I mean, I think we can use AI, but we need to be cautious is one of the messages of the panel. But we'll take the last question and then come back to the group.
Hi, my name's Sarah. I'm a student at Texas A&M University in the United States studying polymer chemistry. And I'm curious what all of your perspectives are on the environmental concerns associated with AI, whether they're potentially overblown or underestimated, and whether they can be offset by the benefits to research.
Okay, so well, maybe can I clarify? You mean the suggestion that we're telling you there are solutions rather than you should be looking for questions? Because I think one of the messages of the panel is we want researchers to be coming up with novel questions.
No, rather like, let's say I'm motivated by some sort of fundamental question. I might know like a traditional way to like search for answers, but then now here I know that AI might be helpful, but I may not have the expertise on how to apply AI. So I know that AI could be a solution, but I don't know what sort of like I have the big question, but there are maybe problems I could apply it to. How do I identify that?
Okay.
Don't worry, you are in the same boat as the 5 of us. So just during the panel, so we also don't know how to use it.
suck it and see, I'd say.
And answering the environmental story. Well, I think obviously computational resources are going to adapt quite a lot to the energy consumption, but I think humanity needs to sort out the problem with the energy supply fundamentally and not blaming it only at the AI. So if not AI, we will get to the same position, but a bit later, maybe 20 years later, with all the other, with the air conditioning or anything else. So it does impact, but the ball is on in our court. We just need to make overall efficiency with the energy generation and energy consumption higher, whether we invent AI or not invent AI. So if not AI, will invent something else which will require energy. Humans are extremely good in creating problems for itself.
I must say, as a parent of a teenager, every time I threaten to create a new synthetic cat video, my kid will say, "Well, thanks for killing the planet," and then I stop. Any last?
I mean, I think on the environment, I would agree. I think we don't cost the cost of energy is not correct. If it included a premium because of the damage that we do to the climate, then the way we use energy would be very different. It's a bit, I mean, it's not an AI problem. It's a generic problem.
Yeah, I wish they would tell us, right, well, before we generate or image or videos, like how much did that cost? And then maybe if we know, we might, be able to make a better judgment on whether that was worth it or not, or even being charged for it, right, and have that cost associated with it. Maybe that'll make it a little bit better informed for how we use these tools.
Tim, any last comments?
I'd say not my field.
So on transparency, I mean, I think there's a great book, Atlas of AI by Kate Crawford, I'd recommend, talking about the sort of the broad environmental cycle of the life cycle of AI, and a bit more transparency that it is much more expensive. If you chat something rather than Googling it, it's like 7-8 times the cost. Look, I'm being told it's time to wrap up. Maybe one last comment from me, just on the volume question that came up and leveling up research. We talk a lot about the quality of generative AI, but I think there's a growing debate about the quantity of generative AI. And my favorite measure of this is that Amazon is one of the world's biggest publishers of self-published books. And Amazon, a couple of years ago now, had to introduce a limit to the number of books you can publish. So any frustrated young novelist there, you can publish through Amazon, but there's a limit that Amazon will now only allow you to publish 3 books every day. Because people were producing hundreds and hundreds, potentially thousands, potentially limitless amounts of information. And so I think one takeaway is, yes, use AI, but be cautious, be skeptical, don't underrate yourself, don't underrate your own intelligence and the ongoing role of human researchers. But I do think there is going to be a real challenge in navigating the slop that is out there. And so one of the things that you need to cultivate is the ability to not just generate new knowledge, which we hope you'll do, but also discernment, working out what's valuable and what's not. And I think that's going to be an increasingly important skill. So we didn't solve generative AI in the hour allotted to us, but I certainly enjoyed myself. I thought it was a rich discussion, great questions from all of you. Please join me in thanking the panelists for their time today.